Hi, my name is Nancy Love. I'm going to make a hopefully brief addition to the um, videos that I've been making over the course of the last year or so that are relevant to a science fiction work that I'm producing called Return to Innocence, Game Over. There will, I hope, be sequels, and they will have other second names, but Return to Innocence is very briefly about a planet very, very much like Earth, all too much like Earth, that has been overtaken by an extraterrestrial species that has installed city sized computers under all major urban areas in the world. They have infected the entire species as well as members of other species with nanobots and have software that allows these city-sized computers to basically control populations of both humans and other types of species. In other words, they could, nanobotically manipulate plague locusts onto your farm or something of that nature. It's a work in progress, and the reason I am making basically what amounts to Return to Innocence game over tutorials on the internet right now is because I just really feel that these ideas need to get out, and these ideas may touch people's hearts, and these ideas are so relevant to the experience of a lot of individuals right now that I don't have the luxury of the time to sit around and write screenplays and books right now, and I certainly don't have the financial wherewithal to produce a movie, which I hope Game Over will become. Yet I feel truly compelled to get these ideas out and to get them out right now. So may they be welcome to your ears, to your heart, and to your soul. Greetings, Earthlings. Game over. It's time we return to innocence. This specific installment is about why members of the resistance, Viva, Viva la Resistance, don't willfully breed. They love children. I mean, they're regular people, people who have decided that they will revolt against this nanobotic, extraterrestrially imposed slavery, and they are, by God, going to get themselves free and their progeny as well. But for the time being, they also know that when their children are born, the children are almost immediately infected with the nanobots. And one of the reasons that governments in this, and in all the governments in the world, it's kind of like one world order, all the governments in the world are united in this process. They have negotiated with the species, the ET species that's doing this to the equivalent of humanity in the science fiction world. One of the reasons they don't like illegal immigrants is because illegal immigrants who are hiding in secret in one of their countries don't generally go to maternity wards and hospitals to have their babies. They have midwives and they have their babies quietly at home. Well, that um, causes the governments to lose the immediate opportunity to infect the infants with nanobots, right? So they don't want people going off having their children without that automatic incul- in, inculcate, that automatic process by which they are brought in to the game. And believe me, on this planet, on this fictional world where this happens to people, the word in is not a good thing. Because to be brought in means that you have become a slave. And I am a person who, throughout my entire life, have tried to free all kinds of slaves. whether that be animals held in captivity in cruel circumstances, or human beings in context of domestic violence or political repression, uh, or in organizations like the mafia. One of the things that I heard years ago in Austin, Texas, was that if you're in the mob, you gain status by breeding for them. It's kind of like being Catholic. The Pope wants you to have children. Why? Because the Pope wants more money. You know, the Vatican wants more babies to be born to Catholic families because they want to ensure a revenue supply for their coffers. Well, the same is true with the mafia, but they don't only want uh, more people to work for them and make even more money for them. They want people that they can control from the get go. So there is an analogy, and I'm going to, right out state that most fiction is not generated out of the clear blue brain of people who are creative geniuses. Most fiction is based in reality. And sometimes we writers will change some of the details and the names to protect both the guilty and the innocent. It is considered a sin, in fact, a cardinal sin, among members of the resistance to purposefully, willfully, knowingly produce a baby. Accidents happen, love occurs, and sometimes babies are generated out of love, and no one intended to generate those babies, they were just in love. So infants born to members of the resistance are welcomed and cherished and lifted up and protected. But nobody who understands the process or the basic foundation of the resistance. Nobody who understands the real principles of the resistance would knowingly, willingly bring anybody in. And in the resistance, people who go around breeding on purpose and go to fertility clinics and say, honey, I think it's time to start a family. Why? Why would you do that in prison? And there are many forms of prison. These people are considered uh, reprobates and sinners. You don't ever, ever have a baby on purpose if that baby is going to be handed over into a system of slavery. It's a question of honor and decency, dignity, and morality. There is a statement that comes up, or a common cry to unite among people in the resistance. And here it is. If you love children, don't have any. If you love children, don't have any. Now, in this science fiction thing I'm producing, um, there are definitely also parallels to Lebensborn. Lebensborn was the Hitler generated program promulgated by the Nazis that had people of Aryan races. They were using women and men from not only from Germany but from Poland, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland. Everybody who was up there, mostly blonde and white. There was a eugenics program called Lebensborn in the 40s and the 50s. Yes, after World War II and after Hitler, I think, was killed, Lebensborn continued in several countries, in which they were basically breeding white people on purpose. And in these maternity wards, some babies didn't make it out alive because they were born with a too narrow or a too wide distance between their pupils. That's called interpupillary distance. Or their foreheads were too narrow or too broad, or their cheekbones too low or too high, the lips not pouty enough or too pouty. There were babies slaughtered within a few days of their birth in the Lebensborn program because they didn't look just right. And keep in mind, Hitler was trying to breed what he called Übermensch and Überfrau, Superman and Superwoman. So there are definitely parallels to the Lebensborn program and breeding in the captivity known as the mob in this science fiction. And I'm going to just make those abundantly clear right now. It won't be a matter if the movie ever comes out or the book ever comes out of critiques going, wow, I wonder if Miss Love is making an analogy to this context or that context. Believe me, she is. But I've also been told by other writers that you create characters that people will fall in love with and identify with. And once you've generated characters that people love, you tell the story through the character's perspective. You don't, even if you have a great overarching theme, even if you want to scream the thematic structure and the ultimate message of your, even if you want to scream the ultimate message of your work to people straight out, it's better not to be plotting and pedantic and overly educational in films and fictional books. It's better to at least attempt to be seeming to want to entertain as well. So, I may now have to scream at you because apparently there's a really big truck outside and I'm not starting over. If you love children, don't have any. I will briefly state or remind some of you, because I'm preaching to the choir in many of these Return to Innocence Game Over videos, that there are many forms of slavery. I have been told by police officers I know, and many of these are very dedicated professionals who've been in the work for decades, who've advanced through the ranks from beat cop to detective to administration, um, that they weren't given a choice by their parents and that they were told early on that they were going to have to go into law enforcement. I've heard doctors say if they were given a little doctor kit when they were a kid and told they were going to be a doctor and they didn't have a choice. I have definitely been told by people in the military that they were told by their military oriented parents that they were going to have to join the military and they didn't have a choice. I asked one woman, why on earth would you do that? My parents said the same thing to me. I was born military intelligence. I was born into the military intelligence community, was told by the time I was 6 years old that I was going to be in the military and I didn't have a choice. NASA tried to recruit me to be a space shuttle pilot and offered to pay my way through medical school when I was 16 years old. NASA said it was my duty to my country and I was designed to be an astronaut, yada yada yada. And I basically saying by the time I was 17 and having yet another conference call of people who were yelling at me that I absolutely had to become an astronaut, I said, I sang down by the old nigger spiritual by the river, I ain't gonna steady war no more. I actually sang a song to NASA when I was 17 years old and already in college and trying to refuse the recruitment because a lot of people don't know that being an astronaut is a military position. It is not a civilian position. You have to sign all the kinds of disclosures and so forth that military people do. I said, I ain't gonna steady war no more. And they decided to stop calling me after that. But the difference between me and the woman I'm talking about is that I did refuse my parents' admonitions to go into the military. I said, I told NASA and I told my parents, with these hands, I am going to make art and peace. I'm not going to develop weapons. I'm not going to become a spy. I am not going to make war with these hands. With these hands, I am going to make art and peace. And I have some, especially the art part. I'm sorry about the noise outside. I can't do anything about that. Is there any peace in urban environments? I don't know. But that other woman said that her parents, and listen to this very carefully because she became one of the most foul, corrupted, depressed, drug addicted people I personally have ever encountered in my life. She became an appallingly vicious person, weaponed up and out of control, has severe impulse control disorder, and talks about how people in the military who've been in combat, especially, are nihilistic and they just um, have seen so much violence, they take it for granted and they become violent, blah, blah, blah. It's not necessarily true by any means. That's an excuse, not a reason for being violent. Um, but she said, when I queried, I said, why did you let your parents? My parents did the same thing, starting from the time I was in first grade. And I didn't go into the military. Why did you let your parents make you go into the military? And she said, we don't understand money. We were rich. And she said that she didn't want to be disinherited because they threatened her with disinheriting. And so for the money, she weaponed up and went around and became a truly unconscionable human being and now blames her parents for making her do it. And I say basically your greed did it to you. If you hadn't been so unconscionably greedy as a young woman, if you hadn't figured out that maybe, just maybe, you could make your own money if you went into whatever occupation you actually wanted, you wouldn't be who you are today. So quit blaming your parents for making you do it. You did it on your own. I don't have a lot of sympathy for people who blame other people for what they themselves have done. I know that there are reasons, but sometimes reasons are presented as excuses for unconscionable behavior. So you need to look at that. So the reason I bring up people trying to perpetuate uh, certain occupations and certain families. Oh yeah, lawyers. I can't even tell you how many people I know whose one or more parents were attorneys, and they said you're going to be an attorney and you don't have a choice. So that's a form of slavery, as far as I can tell. Your parents have no right whatsoever to choose your occupation. Your parents have no right to choose your mate, to tell you where to live. You are a child of nature. It's like Khalil Gibran. Your children are not your children. They are the product of life's own longing for itself. Your children are not your children. They're the product of life's own longing for itself. So don't try to control what they become, because you need to support them, nurture them, and hide and watch as life itself takes over and makes them something beautiful. This situation is also apparent in the. I know the Mexican mafia families along the Mexican border. There was this big thing years ago, back I think in the 70s or 80s. Actually, it was in the early 2000s that I heard, and I was reading in the paper about how uh, children of drug runners in northern Mexico under the Texas border were complaining because their parents were forcing them into that. And some of them wanted to be accountants and attorneys or nurses or whatever, and they didn't want to have to be drug dealers. And I was I was actually someone who helped at least a few of those families not force their children into the error of their own ways, just by talking some sense to people I barely knew. One of those offspring thanked me recently. He became what he wanted to become. He said, "It was you, wasn't it? You taught my parents and then not forcing me to be a drug dealer." That's one of the things I'm so proud of. So consider the vast forms of slavery. Lincoln tried but did not succeed with the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing all the slaves in the world forevermore. He did a great thing. He changed the world. But he and Harriet Tubman. But there are people held in slavery now. Over the course of the last couple of decades, the estimation of global slavery, of people literally being held captive in various ways, in various contexts, in a wide number of countries, including the United States of America. There are slaves in America right now. Right now, there are slaves in this country. Um, these people who do the estimations of numbers of slaves used to say there are 26 to 27 million people being held in slavery worldwide. More recent estimations are more like 40 to 46 million human beings are being held in captivity right now and being forced into various types of slavery. So I think that is very spurious. I think that is way low of an estimation. But I also ask you to open your mind to consider forms of slavery beyond being bound and held in a specific location. I personally consider being in the mafia a form of slavery. I personally consider being born into one of those families where they said the military is going to make you do it, or you got to be an attorney, a doctor, whatever, a cop, a form of slavery. I definitely consider arranged marriage a form of slavery. And it happens in more families, in more cultures, in more countries than you would imagine. I have talked to so many people in bad marriages. Why'd you do that? They said their parents made them do it. Their parents chose their mate for them. I said, why'd you let them? And here again, often, very often, I didn't want to be disinherited. It was the money. So they marry the wrong person and end up having children with that person for some cold hard cash. Marrying the person your parents want you to so that you end up rich and not on your own, that's kind of a form of willful slavery, I would think. So, yeah, I love babies, but I'm writing a science fiction uh, novel and screenplay, and I hope that I do get to produce a movie called Return to Innocence, Game Over, and sequels, because I have a lot to say about returning to the innocence and the game being over. That I hope that I do get to produce one or more films along this line. But for now, in a COVID environment in which a pandemic has already killed more than 4 million people in the space of a couple of years, in which the climate has gone wacko, and we have monster hurricanes and whole states and even countries on fire, wildfires and the attendant mudslides and other damage that occurs from wildfires. We have droughts. We have a world in which the climate itself has gone mad. Tornadoes and floods, the likes of which the human species has not seen in this era. So there are so many reasons not to breed in captivity. There are so many reasons, people, to be a mononatalist at best and an antinatalist at worst. Mononatalism, if you're not familiar with the term, is a one-to-one replacement for a couple to have no more than two children, so that each parent is essentially replaced by one human being. That's called mononatalism. Antinatalism, of course, then is being basically against breeding to begin with. So I encourage you to be either an antinatalist or a mononatalist, because you'll be breeding in captivity on a world gone mad. And some of you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say if you have children on purpose, you will be willingly, knowingly generating slaves. I have no respect for that, none whatsoever. So, people, let's return to innocence, because it's time. It has a real, not fictional, but real grace. As it is time. It is time, now more than ever. Now more than ever. It is time for us to unify and announce that we are going to return to innocence. Game over. This is Nancy Love. I have more courage than the next 200 people put together. And I'm just getting started.